Hey, how are you? Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I suppose if we start at the start, I've kind of went into this completely bare bones and just gonna kind of let the conversation flow, I suppose. For people who maybe are discovering you for the first time or maybe have seen some stuff online and don't really know what it is you do. Some people will see the live show and things and think that's what you do. If you could give, I suppose, your layman's terms version of, who you are and what you do, what would you say?
Sure. Well, so I'm Katie Evans. I am a psychotherapist. So I work in mental health. I've been doing that for 13 years. But 10, 11, I've been private practice. So doing kind of one-to-one adult therapy, but working a lot with trauma. I specialize with gender, sexuality, and relationship diversities. So I work a lot with sexuality and a lot with kind of a relational trauma as well. I used to work in addiction. I worked in addiction services. I worked in a Christian bereavement agency for a bit, where I had to cover up all my tattoos for about 2 years. That was fun, but it gave me a big scope of knowledge around kind of the human experience. And then what I like to do is bring that in with horror movies, and which is how I got to kind of develop the talk and go around and talk about horror movies and the subconscious and psychology and our kind of human stories through the lens of horror.
When you first got into that,
Yes.
I'm assuming you've always been into horror and that kind of stuff. Was there always a correlation in your head, maybe professionally, to be like, at some point I would like to be able to do something where I could bring these two things together?
When I first started, I don't know if I thought that was a possibility. I've always liked horror since I was a kid. Well, I liked spooky stuff. My parents banned me from watching horror until I was sort of teenager, so I'd sneak around and watch it at friends' houses, but I couldn't really get into it until I was like in my sort of teens. Um, and then I studied film and music at uni. So my first time around at uni, I've wasted a lot of money on education, was doing film and pop music. And there I got fascinated with how the kind of stories came together. I'm not like, I don't know much about like the filmmaking process itself. I was more looking at kind of the way we connect to media. And I was really interested in the human stories and the human side of that. And then when I went on to train to be a therapist, it would always be a dream for them to come together. I didn't know if it'd be possible. I didn't know if like people would be interested in kind of therapy and pop culture and spooky stuff. It's sold you to be a bit of a blank canvas. When you're learning to be a therapist, it's like, don't give too much away, be a blank canvas, somewhere to project onto. And I'm not a blank canvas in any sense of the word, really. So it was like, okay, I can maybe bring these things in as therapy is changing and opening up. And it's just been a dream. But I always loved having the two things together. It was figuring out a way to actually use it, to actually do it and bring them together in a kind of, I don't know, interesting way, hopefully.
How has, I suppose, the feedback been? I don't know, professionally. I don't know like what the community around what you do is like. The professional side of it, say, because I feel like, and I think I've heard you say this before in an interview about like, a lot of people think about horror on a surface level and would never connect that with it helping people or making people feel better or escapism or whatever it might be. A lot of people see it as like, if you were suffering in any way, why would you put yourself in front of something like horror? Why would you want to be around? How would that bring comfort? I suppose from both standpoints, was there any pushback? Like, when you started to talk about this stuff, was there any like that there can be no correlation? That obviously would make you worse.
I think there's been a curiosity around it. I've been lucky. So the people that I have around me who, in kind of my day job side of therapy, like my supervisors and stuff, are very open-minded and like, yeah, this makes sense. I mean, Freud talked about the things that unnerve us, right? So it's been there from the start. He wasn't talking about horror movies per se, but he was talking about stuff that creeps us out. So, it's always been there. They've always been connected. I think there would be times when I was working, I'd say, all right, I love horror movies, or I was going to like horror nights in America, or I was doing the kind of spooky stuff. And other therapists I'm working with were a bit like, oh no, like that sounds horrible. Like, why you work with so much trauma? Why would you want to witness more trauma? Or how can these things kind of sit together within you? It doesn't seem to be, the way they experienced it. But for a lot of people, I think they get it, because I think we utilize horror to kind of understand ourselves, and it can be soothing. And a lot of people have had a similar path into it that I have, I think, of like going through difficult stuff, being a sort of weird kid, feeling a bit isolated, discovering horror, finding comfort through it, finding community. So I think I've been quite lucky. I think most people kind of get it, apart from people like, why would you want more darkness in your life when there's already enough, when you're hearing, you know, people's kind of struggles.
Do you think, you know, I think back something like 80s, 90s, even probably early 2000s, horror was always treated as very surface level. Like even something like, I was recently talking to somebody about Jacob's Ladder, and I know when Adrian Lyne made that movie, obviously he knew what he was making and all the themes and everything he wanted to explore. But it really kind of got overshadowed. The studio just kind of treated it as like, oh, it's just like a psychological horror thing. Whatever. We don't really care. There's like demonic looking stuff. It doesn't matter what it's trying to say. And I feel like that was the way for a long time. And now it seems like, I don't know if you feel this, but now it's nearly become like in vogue to say something. Like some people, I can tell the difference between someone who makes a movie that they care about and it has something to say. But now there's like these other people who I think are kind of piggybacking and being like, I feel like I want to just make a movie for the sake of having something to say.
Maybe. I think it's interesting. Like, I think as we've become more aware of our minds and our mental health and trauma, and we all kind of, whether you've been to therapy or studied or not, I think a lot of us have a sense of kind of therapeutic language and mental health. I feel like it's all kind of been brought more in together. I think perhaps we're seeing more in films, or film is almost expected to have this kind of edge to it a little bit more. In the talk, I talk about how we've gone from like going, well, if you read The Monster this way, you could see potentially this is around abuse, to like Invisible Man, where it's like, this is about psychological abuse, or around kind of Renfield, or it's about narcissistic abuse. So I think it's all become a lot more kind of clear. You don't have to read into it so much. And interestingly, even because I went to see Weapons, and I was like, oh, this will be really cool. I'm going to analyze this. Like, seems to be around addiction, and I'd look at this from this kind of addiction services. This would be cool. And then I had an interview with the director, and he's like, please don't read into this film, just enjoy it. And I was like, oh. Like, so I think there's kind of both ways. I think sometimes people are creating film and like it has to have a deep meaning or a deep psychological meaning. And other times people like, stop reading into this, just watch a film and enjoy it. Because I think we do. We all know so much, and I'm probably so guilty of it, of looking for the deeper meaning in so much. But I think in horror, I don't know, because it comes from our darker subconscious stuff, can it ever have no meaning? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true actually. Because like even when I think back to like, and I don't know why, because a lot of people give me a lot of shit for this, but there's a time period there in the early 2000s where a lot of movies came out that I remember as like, I don't know, popcorn movies or like comfort movies, like things like the Hitcher remake or House of Wax, or all these kind of like 90-minute movies that you could just put on. There's not really anything to them necessarily on the surface. And like I do definitely feel like I've gone from that now to like every time I look at something now, I'm like, right now I need to watch like a 4-hour like analysis on like every little, oh, the reason the light comes in that window in such a way is because he's trying to represent the thing. And it makes me think, because I feel like I've become so self-aware of like my faults, what's going on in my life, what's been going on, and I've been to counseling, I've been to therapy, and I've done all these things. And sometimes I feel like maybe, I don't know if it's for better or for worse. I don't know if you deal with this with people, where is there such a thing as becoming like hyper aware to the point where like I feel like I kind of go in and out of these phases of, sometimes I'm really in tune and I'm like, okay, I'm glad that I know, I'm self-aware enough to know that something's going on. But then sometimes I feel like I don't allow myself to enjoy anything because I'm constantly trying to like figure out everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely guilty of overanalyzing everything and overanalyzing myself. And I think once you get into that world where you're like, well, everything comes from subconscious in a certain place, and yeah, I probably analyzed the hell out of everything too much. So, I mean, I don't know. Like one of my favorite horror movies is Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and I can just sit and watch that, right? I can just have a good old time. Technically, you could probably look at it as like childhood imagery being utilized in this way that taps into a subconscious childhood fear, or you could find meaning in it. But sometimes you just want to switch off. But I mean, I think as humans, we can do it. Even in the therapy room, there are times when people are feeling a feeling and they're trying to figure out why they're feeling it. And it's like, well, maybe you're just angry. Maybe you're
Yeah.
just angry because that thing makes you angry and it's okay. So I think it's kind of experiencing film in the same way. Like sometimes we're going to feel it because it taps into a deep core belief in ourselves or wound or trauma, or it's got a deep meaning. And other times I think we just feel something because actually it's natural to feel that as a response to what we're seeing. So we're going to feel scared because what we're being presented with is designed to scare us. But yeah, I think we're analyzing the hell out of things at the moment, which is good for me because I work in like psychoanalysis. But it's I do wonder. We have a lot more knowledge on that kind of stuff these days.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because and I don't like now when I think about this, like, I would hear grandparents say like, oh, back in our day when we were younger and when we were teenagers and stuff. And I would kind of be like, oh, every old person says that. Everyone when they get a bit older says that. And now I feel like now I'm starting to like romanticize, oh well, I remember like the 90s, the very early 90s and stuff, and things were different. And oh, it's not like I have a nearly 12-year-old son, and like I'm looking at him grow up now, and I'm thinking back to when I was 12, and I'm like, wow, things are like so different. Like we might as well have lived on different planets at this point. Like it's not even the same.
It's so different, and I always look back on myself and like I feel like I was so naive when I was a kid, like so much more. But there wasn't like social. I mean, I'm in my 40s, and there wasn't the like social media. There was like the birth of the internet, but it was like looking at online encyclopedias, trying to do my homework and stuff. It
Mhm.
wasn't like the same world. And I guess we didn't have so much like background to a lot of the sort of films and actors and processes and directors, and so I think even the way we saw media was quite different. But saying that, I mean, it's really interesting because I look back on films I watched when I was a teenager. So that one of the first experiences was going to like a showcase video or blockbuster video and kind of seeing the VHS artwork, which I think was for a lot of people that was like the gateway in. You'd see the artwork and be like, well, that's cool, because that's how they sold it. They couldn't do the same social media campaign. It was about like that image, right? And so I'd pick films based on that, and
Yeah.
I'd watch them and just be like, oh, this is just like shocking and gory and cool. And I wouldn't read too into it because I was just enjoying it. And then even you watch those back as an adult and you see totally different stories running underneath them that I just wouldn't have noticed. Rewatch, even Candyman is such a deep film, right? About so many different things around cultural trauma and around, who's the real villain, and so many different elements, the way we villainize different people, and this gothic romance in it and everything, coming from stories from Clive Barker around kind of social difference. So once you know all that, when I was a kid, I watched Candyman. It was just like it's a boogeyman with a hook, and you say his name in the mirror. And we used to dare each other to do it, and that was as deep as it got. So I had this lens of like horror back then was just this one level because I was a kid. Watch it again as an adult, and it's like now I see it. I mean, you could look at basket cases around repressed sexual trauma, or the part, not trauma, but the repressed sexual desire, sorry, or the part of us that wants to access sexuality and can't, or the kind of doppelganger bit. You could read most of those schlocky films through psychoanalysis if you really wanted to. But in a way, I'm kind of glad I got to see them as just like, ugh, that's gross.
Yeah, it's funny, like you mentioned Clive Barker, and I remember that. I don't know, he's one of the ones that sticks out to me all the time. And I remember seeing the artwork with Pinhead on Hellraiser and stuff, and always like walking by and be like, "Oof, I wonder what that's like." Um, and seeing it, and again, very surface level, it was just like, oh, scary guy with pins in his face, all this horrific stuff happens, or Nightbreed, it's like all these creepy kind of monsters and stuff. And then, you know, like you said, you get older and you start to like, I started to do kind of a deep dive into Clive Barker, and I was like, wow, he has a lot to say, which just completely, and that's fine. You can watch it at that level and just enjoy it and be like, oh, that was a cool, fun horror movie, whatever. But then there's like all these other things that he's purposely trying to, I suppose, convey. Um, there's, I don't know, like I talk a lot about nostalgia, and I'm kind of fascinated to hear your take on this, where I suppose in the last what, like 5, 10 years, things like videotapes have come back. Vinyl has become $1 billion industry again. DVDs seem to be on the uptick, like people buying secondhand DVDs and starting collections again, physical stuff, and magazines are even kind of coming back around. Um, for as much as we know and for as much social media and technology and stuff, do you think like some sort of, I don't know, something back in that other than just like it's cool and in trend?
I think there's always been a pull for nostalgia throughout time. I mean, I remember being a kid and like stuff from the 70s was coming back in the 90s. There always seems to be that slight, I mean, in my head, the 90s is 10 years ago, but there seems to be that time gap, right? But I think there is something on nostalgia. Like a lot of people are feeling quite disconnected in the world right now. There's a lot of loneliness. There is a lot of, like we're quite fragmented, I think. And I think there is this nostalgia for a time, like maybe it is rose tinted glasses, but I think there is a nostalgia to what that was and connecting to something physical. Because if we think about it, a lot of what we take in right now kind of doesn't exist. I know that sounds weird, but it's all contained in like screens and internet, and it doesn't really exist. It's not something we can hold on to, and it's not something we connect with physically. So I wonder if there's something in that. Psychologically, nostalgia is a really kind of interesting concept that can be utilized because it's something that brings us kind of warmth and joy, but can also bring us like sadness and can bring us despair at times. So it's utilized in like horror quite a lot to connect us to something in a way that could bring up a lot of emotion. Nostalgia brings up a lot with it. And also we our memories, the way memory works is fascinating because we don't really know what's real that we remember or not, right? So memory is half real, half created, half experienced, half felt. And so if you can tap into that in things as well, I think that creates this really fascinating like connection to the past. But I do think we want something we can touch. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because with like COVID and that, we lost a lot of touch. I might be wandering off on a weird track here, sorry, but we lost a lot of touch and physical connection. I think since then our world sort of fragmented even more because, a lot more people are working from home. I used to work with clients face to face. I don't. I work from a kind of online therapy now, and a lot of people work in their own bubbles and spaces. And during COVID, we couldn't touch one another, and there was like a kind of skin loneliness kind of epidemic and all this stuff going on. So I wonder if we're almost wanting that thing we can physically connect and touch as much as we can at the moment. I don't know. It would be fascinating to look at it more, but
Yeah, it's a weird one because before the show we were talking about things like Halloween Horror Nights and stuff, and I've thought about this a lot more since COVID, and I don't know if that hadn't have happened if I would even have had any of these thoughts, but like I've always been a physical person. Like people would say, oh, why do you still buy magazines, or why do you still like have stuff? Now I am currently in the process of trying to downsize a lot of the things I bought because they just don't serve me anymore, but it made me think about that. And why do I love to be at things like Halloween Horror Nights or whatever, outside of the the generic answer of like, oh well, I love horror and I love seeing scary things, whatever. I think it's that thing of like, I don't know, it makes me feel alive. Like I feel connected to something. Or like when I go to the cinema, it's a different experience. Like I went to see Scream 7, and it's not even really about whether I come out of it liking it or loving it or whatever, but like when you're in there and it's like a packed screen, there's a kind of I suppose, an energy you're tapping into or something like that that you don't even realize. And I'm like, now I kind of start to get why I thrive on those things.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I talk about in the talks, or I finish with as well, is about community. Because as much as it's analyzing the films and looking at what goes on for the individual, it's something that brings us together. And one of the big things that I love about horror is the communities. I love the conventions. I love going to horror nights. I like seeing films in the cinema. Even if I go by myself, you're in a room full of people experiencing the same emotions and responses at the same time. But also they found that, it creates almost like it's a bonding experience, right? So going through difficult things together creates a response in the body and mind that bonds us to one another. So it's kind of a thing that's ingrained in us, so that if a crisis happens, we kind of help each other out, or we connect somehow. So, you know, when you see people going through really difficult things and they find themselves feeling more connected to those who live through it with them, horror can actually do a similar kind of thing. So if you're running through a haunted house and you're all doing it together, you come out of it and you feel like connected in that moment. And so films can do that same thing. I mean, to be fair, I did it once and I used my own mother as a human shield. So I don't know what that says about me as a person. My mom, who hates horror movies, and I made her do it with me and then hid behind her. But ultimately it creates a connection. Like, it creates a feeling of bondedness because you're experiencing all that kind of threat and recovery at the same time. So I think there's something really fascinating both in kind of experiencing it because we all love it, and because I think there is something of us that we like to find people like us, but also the actual experience it has on the mind and body, and the fact that it does actually like almost like trauma bond us in like a fun way, if that makes sense.
No, I know.
It's
Yeah.
really,
You mentioned loneliness
yeah.
a couple of minutes ago, and I don't know, this is just my opinion. This is not I'm not saying this is fact or anything, but I have found over the years, I think me personally, I've always looked for a sense of belonging, whether that be in a relationship, and then sometimes that hasn't worked out. So I've always been looking for maybe a community or a group of people to like, I don't know, I suppose for want of a better term, like take care of me or like look after me, or like I can be there. And I've found like in a lot of conversations I've had with people, um, from an audience standpoint, not let's say like creatively or professionally or people I'm interviewing, but just other people, other fans, other uh there seems to be an awful lot of loneliness. Now, obviously, that's probably skewed in my head because I'm probably constantly talking to people who are in the horror community. There seems to be a lot of it, and I don't know whether that's what brings us together, but I think people still feel incredibly lonely. Do Is that a direct result of what you were saying about screens, internet, things like that? That when we do maybe get put into like I've been to horror conventions and stuff, and some people become social butterflies. And then I think other people go there with the best intentions and then maybe come away not having explored that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think the way the world works has definitely changed the way that we connect. And what's interesting as well is that we develop empathy by seeing responses to what we do. So, or we develop a sense of connection and consequence from kind of seeing responses and experiencing people's emotions and their facial expressions, or seeing things on people that we start to read their emotional responses to what they're going through. If we're existing on screens and we're doing more typing and writing to one another, and also the way the culture is kind of like just write a comment and not care where it lands with somebody, we're not also experiencing the same level of kind of empathy and connection and eye contact. We're not reading each other in the same way, so we perhaps don't feel as connected to one another. We're existing in our own spaces. Life's getting more expensive, so we're sitting and watching movies, which on one hand is great because there's a lot of good movies to watch, but we are sat at home just watching TV or watching streaming or whatever it is. We're not engaging with one another so much. So I think it is setting the world up to become more lonely. And a lot of people will come out of lockdown and talking to me and saying, like, I've kind of forgotten how to make friends, or I've forgotten how to interact, or I've forgotten to like have a conversation with somebody. We gain a lot of who we are from how we interact with others. So without that, starved of that for a while, people kind of came out of it with a loss of confidence or forgetting how to interact. So the world's definitely had an impact. I think in horror communities, one of the things that I really like about going out and meeting people all over, I've been to like UK and Ireland, multiple different places, is people sharing their stories afterwards of what got them into horror, or how horror helped them, or how they met their friends through it. And it's, there will be some people who watch it just because they like the thrill and the gore and the excitement. I don't want to make out that everyone that likes horror has some sort of trauma or loneliness, but for me personally, I was a very scared kid. Like, I was really anxious. I struggled making friends. I was bullied. I felt weird. I was very lonely. And I found like a place to relate through these monsters and through these movies. And I think that's quite a universal experience. I'm certainly not alone in that. And then when you get to go out and meet other people who have a similar connection to the same monsters or the same stories, it does create this sense of community that we need as people. So I think there is more loneliness in the world, which, I mean, horror is getting bigger, so maybe it's tied in, I don't know. But there is also perhaps this something in us that might draw us to the darker side of things because there's something in us that feels a little difficult, or we've experienced feeling lonely or monstrous in some way.
Would you say that the key, I know there's no one size fits all answer or anything, but like, would the key for people, because I get so many messages from people to ask different things, and a lot of it centers around like, I think community, depression, loneliness, relationships. And I think a lot of times people just feel lost. And then I suppose in turn, something like horror is escapism and things like that for people. And you can kind of go into yourself and just be in that world. And sometimes people go too far down that road. And it, okay, yeah, it's helping them, but it's maybe not pushing them to do the work maybe, or what they need to do that might actually help. Would you say that physical interactions and things like that are a really good thing to try and push yourself to do?
No, I think it can be difficult. So, with compassion, where it's not always the
Yeah.
easiest to go out and meet people and be around people, but we are social creatures. So having social interaction is going to help. Loneliness, often you can be in a room full of people and still feel lonely. It's about the quality of connection you're building. So going out and trying to build connection, have conversations, share, that's always going to be beneficial. The interesting thing about horror movies is it is escapism. It's ultimately a lot of it fantasy. So it is somewhere to escape and be in that, to kind of get away from things. But it actually can help us do the work, because what horror does is it shows us a lens of the kind of shadow side of things, or the stuff, or the way we don't normally want to look at things. So it can take the topic of depression, and whereas you might see it presented one way on television, this might go, yeah, this is just how bad it can feel. Like, this is the worst side of depression, right? Or this is the worst side of relationships. Like, relationships can be scary for someone, and horror goes, well, yeah, look, this is where your mind could take you with it, and this is what might be happening with this kind of internal battle around what relationships could be that makes them so scary. And it helps you confront it. A big part of therapy is confronting that stuff, not just going, oh, well, it'll be fine, which we can kind of do to ourselves and be like, well, it's fine. I'm sure it'll be okay. Horror actually says, well, maybe this is the deep-rooted fear. Maybe this is the trauma. Maybe this is the way you can look at it. And actually we can process some of our stuff and do the work, not as a replacement for therapy, but it does allow us to do the kind of work through the stories and the tropes and the models that horror offers us, because it uses psychology, because it has to, because if it's going to really scare us, it has to tap into something very human. But we can then utilize that to kind of understand it and understand what makes it so scary.
There's a lot of people I hear talk about, I think with how popular the internet and social media and stuff has gotten, everybody, I think most people have a degree of either maybe you wanted to and now you feel like you have a platform or an opportunity to, or some people maybe fall into the gap of, well, everybody else seems to be doing it, so maybe I should be doing it. This thing of being somebody, whatever that means, on like on the internet or whatever, or um, being seen by people and people respecting you for a certain title or a status or whatever, whether that be to become an author or a filmmaker or whatever. Um, I don't know like the question of like what are we here for is a really big question. But I hear people talk about legacy. Some people would argue, oh, we're just here to experience things, good and bad, and that's the whole point. Where do you sit on all that? Because I feel like I flip flop between so many different things. Like there's times where I feel like in life I'm like I haven't really achieved anything, whatever that means in my head. And then other times I'm like, I just want to experience as many things as I can, and I don't really, not that I don't care about other people, but I don't care about their perception of what I'm doing. Like there is people that I know in like bigger circles that would say something like, wasting money going to Orlando is like pointless and I shouldn't do it because I'm a grown man. where do you sit on all that though? Like that line between taking your enjoyment out of your life, but then also having some sort of a purpose or something that makes you feel good.
I think it's really interesting. I think I move around with it too. I think a lot of this idea of leaving something behind or leaving a legacy ultimately taps into our fear of death. I think we feel that by creating a legacy or creating something that we leave behind, we feel like we don't truly die. And so we often try, and because ultimately when we're gone, right? I mean, we will leave people behind who will remember us. We leave memories, moments. When we're gone, we're gone. I think a lot of the time, wanting to create a legacy, wanting to leave something in the world is about our own mortality, around our own sense of fragility. I like to make an impact on people. It's really interesting because social media scares the hell out of me. I like doing these talks because I like talking about the stuff that I talk about, but visibility is actually something that really scares me. I have the worst imposter syndrome. I'm always waiting for somebody to like say something mean. I don't know. I'm always like, ugh. So
Yeah.
I did so uncomfortable. And it's almost like, because now I do want to kind of get more stuff out there in terms of like books and that, you have to play the game a bit with social media, but I also hate it. So I'm in this strange position with that, in terms of being seen and visibility. But I like the idea of having an impact. For me, it's always about like, have I somehow helped somebody's life, or have I somehow helped people see things in a different way, which I think comes from the therapeutic work. That's what got me into it originally. As much as I like the idea of bringing horror and therapy together, what got me into being a therapist was my own trauma, and I encountered somebody that helped me along the way. And I was like, well, if I could do that, if I could at least know that in my life I've made an impact on someone else's life in a positive way, that's something that I really enjoy. But also I want to seize the moment. I want to kind of go out and do things and live life. I mean, look, I've lost friends along the way who were too young to go. And it's like, do you know what? Actually, I really want to make the most of it. I think working in a bereavement agency was a big kind of eye opener on that too. You have to sit with death like every single day. And it's like, well, I can't choose when that happens, but I can choose what I do while I'm here. And so I think there is part of wanting to enjoy the moments that I can. And if that means, going to, my cousin laughs at me because I go to theme parks all the time. Like, she does these like deep, meaningful trips where she goes and sees all these different parts of the world. And I'm like, theme parks. But you know what? I love theme parks. And if it's that, then it's that. But yeah, it's a huge question.
Yeah, and like it's been fascinating me for the last while because I tie it into a lot of things that I like, and then I wonder, do I like certain things because it makes me feel a certain way or whatever, and I don't know I suppose what that question even really means. Like, what are we here for? What are we supposed to be doing or not doing? Like you're not too far away in the UK. Have you ever dealt with like, the idea of, being in the UK, Ireland and places like that, and maybe in smaller areas at times, it can feel very like claustrophobic, like that kind of, I always use the term small town mentality, even if you're not in a small town. I feel like maybe, and I'm not saying that, somewhere like the States has all the answers or they have all their problems as well, and they have a lot of things going on. But I feel like just on a general like baseline, they're a little bit more like, good for you, go do that thing you want to do, like even if it's fake. Whereas like I at least find anyway, there's a big portion of the Irish mentality that's very like begrudgery and like kind of without even realizing. I think it's like a subconscious thing where people are just like, oh sure, who does your man think he is trying to, or who does she think she is trying to do that? And like they don't realize the effect that over time, if lots of people are saying that to you, it starts to wear on you. And you're like, wow, I despise where I am.
It's odd, like, because I live, so I'm on the edges of Liverpool. I always say Liverpool because people don't know the suburb that I live in. But and like my friends and family are so supportive, but it feels like the general atmosphere of this particular area is a little bit like, don't take risks, stay nice and safe. Meet a partner when you're in high school sweethearts, live a couple of roads from your parents, just have a nice life, get a roof over your head, do the same. It's a little bit like that. It's a little bit risk averse. And so I think I grew up with that. So the idea was like, well, just get a job, settle down, do the thing. But it never felt right, which is why I moved to London. And what was hilarious is like when I first moved to London, I was working in punk bars and in bands and stuff like that. And I dyed my hair and I had like a white streak through my hair. Came back to Liverpool and someone was like, who does she think she is? She moved to London, she put a streak in her hair. And it was like, I moved to a different city and I dyed my hair. You know, it was like this big thing.
Yep.
But I think Liverpool's weird. There is a lot of support. People are very supportive, very friendly. But I think some of the areas around the edges can be a little bit like, well, don't take too much of a risk. You know, play it safe. So it's interesting. But I mean, a lot of the questions we're kind of looking at now, even in this conversation, is around like existentialism, right? It's all those big questions that haunt us as humans. And I don't know if we have the answers, which is perhaps why we turn to film and literature and art and all those things to try and find out, well, what's it all about? What am I meant to do? Like, what's the rule book? Perhaps there's a freedom in letting go of that rule book a little bit.
Do you think that's the basis of why inadvertently we do everything we do? Like why we all behave in the way we behave is that thing of like, you said something a few minutes ago about, you know, the fact that we all fear death. And like, I would say probably even up until right now, I would have said, well, I'm not afraid of dying. And then if I track back from that, I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm afraid of the massive portion between now and dying. And because when I'm dead, I assume I'm just dead. So it's kind of less about the actual act of like, okay, I'm dead and I'm going to be buried and what will happen to me then. And more about like I even think about things and it feels quite, I don't know, sort of selfish and weird, but like, a lot of my family are older now and like I'm starting to see some of like the consequence maybe of not trying to do what you wanted to do and maybe only unplugging from the matrix in your 70s or 80s and being like, oh, everything I thought was real is actually, you know what I mean? And it's kind of a weird place to be looking at people who would have been maybe a little bit like you just said, where it's like, get a job, meet a partner. Oh, it's fine if you argue all the time. That's just the way it is. Have some kids, just get a big mortgage and just live and sure, that's it. Then you die and end the story. And now I see some of those people and are like, don't do what I done. Like I'm only realizing now the error of my ways and like I shouldn't have. And I think about things like, you know, when I get older, will I have somebody there with me when I'm older? Will I have grandkids? Will I have any? Because I don't have your conventional, like I didn't get married. We didn't, I had a child when I was relatively young and it's just been turmoil. And like, I kind of wonder, I'm like, what's it like as you get older? Because you're still you. So that doesn't change. You know, people see a grandparent and they go, oh, they're old people. And I'm like, but in their head though, they're still them. They're not like, oh, I'm the old person now.
Exactly. Like I look like my dad's in his early 70s and he still talks about old people, you know, so it's like,
yeah.
So and it's really interesting. I think we do like to say old people because it separates them out from us. I think it's really interesting. The human condition, I mean, there is fear of death is a huge thing. There are a lot of people who have a lot of death anxiety and it's that thing of like not existing anymore. But I think for many of us, it is that bit before, as you say, that's scary. And when you look at it, even from the lens of bringing it back to kind of horror films and stuff, that's what it plays with more than anything, right? I mean, it is around the fear of death, but if you look at body horror and the way that's utilized, right? And you pull in Kristeva's theory on the abject, which is that it's not seeing the heart stop or the machine flatline that makes us feel sick. It's a body falling apart because it reminds us of our fragility. It reminds us of our change. There's lots of things about, you know, we're all going to age. Our body is going to change. We're not going to recognize ourselves from who we were physically when we were younger. And that reminds us of our fragility and our ultimately sort of decomposing, which is you know, that's the stuff that scares us. But also a lot of movies, there is a point where there's a realization or things aren't what they seem anymore, or like you thought that person was your partner, actually they're not, they're a killer, or you thought the world looked this way, or you thought your house was safe and now it's not. And so there's a lot of these things that really play on the human fear of uncertainty and not knowing what's going to happen to us, who we are. What if I thought my life looked this way and now I realize it's something completely different? What if my body falls apart? What if I can't control what happens to my body or my mind? And so I think this is why we can be drawn to these things, because they're huge questions and there is no answer. We can't predict the future. As humans, we spend so much of our time trying to think, what will it look like when I'm older? I'll never know until I get there. And so we find ways to manage that anxiety, because it's a human fear. It's going to happen to us all. This is cheerful, isn't it? But it's gonna.
But I think
But
it's a
it
really
is.
important thing because, like, so many
Yeah.
people, and myself included, I think struggle with that, and a lot of times people don't want to bring it up. That like the reality of it is that, and it's not to be all doom and gloom and whatever, but like acknowledging, like you just said, that that is a thing, and like, but there has to be another way around. Like I got really fixated at one point and probably spent 12 months in the one place just because I was constantly going over this in my head. So I think I wasted an entire year just being there and every day thinking about like, oh, but what's going to happen next year? And I'm like, wow, I've allowed 12 months to pass. Anyway.
I've certainly done it, and particularly around things like I'm an only child, and so the like taking care of my parents is obviously on my mind a lot, and then thinking around like there was a point where I was working myself to burnout, particularly like being self-employed, just kind of getting into therapy. Before that, I'd worked in like tattoo studios and bars, and these like, they were great fun, but they didn't come with any financial security. I was literally like spending as I went just to fund my education and living off like bread and hope. So, it was suddenly I was like, right, now I've got a chance to make money. I know I've got my parents ahead of me, but they're older. I need to care for them. And I need to make sure everything's in line. And I worked so hard. I wasn't enjoying my life. I wasn't going out and seeing things. I wasn't spending on anything. I wasn't socializing as much. I was literally like getting up at 5 a.m., sleeping in the office at lunchtime because I was so exhausted, going home and just crashing out. And it was all my fear of trying to control the future, which meant I was not living in the day when I was in my like 30s in London and should have been really taking it all in. So, there's definitely, I think then as I get older, a bit of a sense of, oh, have I lost time along the way? I was in some bad relationships. I was in a very abusive relationship at one point, which meant I kind of lost a big chunk of time. And I think now in my 40s, I'm like, okay, I've got like, how many years have I got now to fit everything? And how do I kind of manage and make it the best that I can? I think it does hit us. It's not a midlife crisis, like I'm going to go and I buy a Ferrari or something, but there is this like, sense of time that's suddenly creeping in. And how I want to do that and how I want to live in that. But again, part of that is like, well, you know what, let's go and talk about horror movies and psychology and see what happens. Let's see if people take to it or not. Otherwise, I'm going to be a therapist in a box room in my house. And I love my work with my clients, but I exist in this house. So it's like, okay, why don't get out there and do something new?
Do you think that just when you mentioned lost time, and I definitely feel like that. I'm like, I feel like I lost probably all of my 20s, some of my 30s, and I'm like, like, have I just lost like last like 15, 16 years? And it creates this like crazy anxiety. Is there an argument there for though? I would always use that term of like, oh, if I knew then what I know now. Is that just the point of the human experience though? Is like you don't and you have to, and like there's, you mentioned relationships, like I would blame what other people done to me for everything that's gone on with me, even though the relationship ended 10 years ago, and I'm going, yeah, but that person done this thing to me and it makes me feel this way and now I behave like this. And I started to realize at what point does the onus fall on me now to have to, I can't keep using that as a crutch. Is that the whole point of the human experience, is that we don't know until we know, if that makes sense?
Yeah, we can't know. I think it's very easy, and I work a lot with people who are looking at past versions of themselves with a very critical lens, or looking at past, well, I should have known better. Well, I shouldn't have put myself there. Well, I shouldn't have done this. You can't know until you do it, right? And so a big part of human experience is going through the difficult lessons. It's learning the painful things. It can be painful. It can be uncomfortable, but it's what you then do with it. It's how you go forward with it. It's not to say, were not impacted. I've certainly, like, I've got CPTSD from some of the stuff that I kind of experienced, and I still feel that. And there are days, no matter how much therapy I've done or how much I understand the topic, there are days it hits me and it's horrible, you know. And it's having compassion that that exists, but also, how do I want to kind of move forward now? It's when you look at grief, it's like you can't make the bereavement go away. You can't bring a person back. You can't bring a part of yourself back. You can't bring the thing back that you lost, but you can find the path forward in that new direction with what you've experienced. And that's the point that we think about in therapy. Okay, well, you know what? You can't go back. You can't change it. You had to live through that. But how do you take it forward? And, you know, I look back and there are certainly times, you know, I was, you know, spending my time probably partying a little too hard or being in bad relationships or, you know, not doing the things that I potentially could have done differently. But that version of me didn't know, you know, and if I hadn't have done that, I perhaps wouldn't see the world the way I see it now. I wouldn't be the therapist that I am. I wouldn't read, you know, into things in life through the same lens or the same understanding. And when you meet someone and they've had a similar experience and you get it on that deep level, it's like we talk about post-traumatic growth as well as post-traumatic stress. So, you know, it's almost like, okay, well, it sucked. I would love that time back. I'd love to, but I can't. And, you know, my 20s, I was who I was. So it's now, how do I take that forward and utilize it in a way that's going to make it feel at least manageable?
And I think it's like a really interesting thing because there's a lot of uh, obviously from some of the things you're doing, it's clear like there's a lot of correlation there between horror and a lot of these feelings and stuff. And there's a lot of people out there who I think probably don't have the courage, or they feel like they can't ask the question or say, you know what, I actually do feel like that. Or but I get a lot of like private messages at times from people being like, you know, I feel this way or I feel that way, or I listened to this conversation with such a person and it gave me that feeling for an hour that I felt better and I forgot about everything that's going on. And I think there's a lot of that out there, and people kind of are lost and don't really know what to say or what to do or how to proceed.
Hugely. I think while there is more knowledge around these things, I don't know if people necessarily know where to go with it. And so I think if you can provide a place, I mean, look, I doing these get to go out and do these events and stuff and tours. I'm not like, I don't talk like an academic. I've done the reading and learned the stuff, you know, but I don't necessarily talk like an academic or do it for that purpose. Although I love bringing the topics together because I find it fascinating. I just get to geek out in front of a room full of people for a couple of hours. But my favorite bit, honestly, is that you will get people come up and be like, I thought I was alone in this, or everyone told me I was weird because I feel this way and I like this thing, or everyone questioned like, oh, well, you know, if you're going through so much bad stuff, why do you like these films? Or, you know, and people didn't understand how stuff was helping them or what they were experiencing, or how somehow these films that look horrible were connecting into something and helping. But just in general, people who felt alone suddenly don't feel so alone anymore in a room full of people all sharing their experiences about it. So I think it's amazing. It's definitely something that comes from a place of experience for me. I always say with therapists, it's like, we've probably been through it. Like, you know, we can't give away too much. But, you know, when we're talking about stuff, we've been through stuff. And so, you know, it's just offering a space where people can feel safe enough to some degree to at least maybe even look at themselves or ask a question or share a little bit. It's important.
You mentioned imposter syndrome a few minutes ago, and again, like it kind of opened my eyes a little bit, and I hope it does the same for other people, where they go, ah, so even people I perceive as like not dealing with that stuff also have those feelings from time to time. You know, when the concept or whatever, I don't know if you can speak to how it all came about with the talks and everything like that. It just made me think of that, like that feeling of, even though you know what you know, it's not like, you know, it's not lost on you. It's like, oh, now all of a sudden everything that I know, and I know my work, doesn't go away. But it's that feeling of, like you said, like, you know, someone says something mean, something goes wrong, things maybe that are out of your control. It has nothing to do with um your skills, you know, how good you are at what you do, what you know, what you don't know. It's like all this other stuff that floats around.
Yeah, it's always, I think I've always had it. And what's interesting about being a therapist is as much as you go to people who kind of keep track of your work, there are boards above you who like you have to send, you know, essays to and prove like this is the CPT I've done, this is the information that I've learned. Ultimately you work on your own. So you just kind of have to hope for the, you know, and luckily I learn from my, you know, the people that come and talk to me that the feedback I get is good. But so that I think has always been there a little bit. And then when I got up there, I feel like horror is a genre I absolutely love, but I always feel like there's a million people out there that know a whole lot more about it than I do. And so there's bringing the two things together was like, well, there might be people who know more about psychology and people that know more about horror and people that, and this is going to be terrifying. So as much as when I put it together, I was like, okay, I like this talk. It's kind of cool. And it's interesting with, because I do it through seed talks, you have to pitch it for people who come in the room and know absolutely nothing as much as people who will have that kind of depth of knowledge. So you can't go in assuming people there have watched horror movies, because lots of people come up to me and go, you know what, I came with my partner, I've never watched a horror movie in my life, but I found this really interesting because the psychology side. Or people come who watch films but have never like touched on much Freud or Jung or Christeva. Or so you've got to kind of be aware that everyone in the room is going to have totally different knowledge bases. So you have to pitch it the best that you can to make it accessible. But as soon as that Q&A starts, because there's a half-hour Q&A at the end of each talk, I literally said again, this is where I'm going to get found out. This is where,
Yeah,
like, this
the
little voice.
uncontrollable aspect of it. Yeah.
So as much as I'm like, yeah, okay, I think I know this stuff. There's like the bit always goes, and this is where they're gonna get you. And it's like it's normally such a lovely discussion in the room. Everyone's just having a lovely like chat about their curiosities or their experiences. It never feels like they're trying to catch me out, but it's just that little worm in the back of my head says it. And you know, I got one bit of negative feedback out of everything else was lovely, one little bit, and I was like, that's the bit that's true. You know, so there'll always be this like, you know, element that I kind of cling on to with that. But I think a lot of us do. I think, you know, there's always this slight, well, maybe speaking personally, it's my one bit of insecurity.
That's something that fascinates me. And I'm always like, why do we do that? Because I feel like everyone does that. Like I could have 100 comments and it's all people being nice. And then I get one person says something. And for the next month, like randomly, I'm like fixating on, like I could be just like sitting in traffic and I'm like, a person that said like, oh, I have no idea what I'm talking about, or who do I think I am, or whatever. And I'm like, why am I fixated? I've forgotten about the other 99 comments I've gotten. People being positive, being supportive, being nice, being whatever. And I'm fixated on that little tiny thing.
Me too. I think it hits a wound. I think, you know, I don't know. I imagine, and there seem to be people that are not so impacted by critical feedback, because I have friends who are like, well, you know, if you put up this thing and you get hate on it, at least you're getting comments, at least you're getting, you know, a conversation going. So you don't encourage the hate as much as you encourage the support. That's my idea of hell. That's an absolute nightmare to me, because if I get thousands and thousands of lovely messages, I get one that goes, yeah, I didn't enjoy that. I thought it was like useless. I'm like, oh, I'm useless, and it just again will spin around in my head, because I think it hits a wound. I mean, you're speaking from personal experience. I think there is always that little bit in me that goes, oh, maybe you are dumb. And to it, like so I put a thing on social media, so it's not like a secret, but part of the abuse I went through years ago was being told I was stupid, or that like I didn't make any sense, or that, you know, it wasn't interested, what I was writing wasn't interesting to anyone, because I was just doing writing at the time. So I think I already have a wound there. So when someone says it, it like sits in that wound and just re-irritates it, and it's like, oh, maybe I am stupid. It's like, well, no, you know. So I think we can all go through it. Luckily, I've found techniques now to kind of bring myself out of it, and then use it as a motivator. And it's like, all right, well, then I'm going to write more then. You know, I've kind of taken it as a bit of a motivator, but it took a long time.
Is that a key thing that people should know? I feel like I've been told this by so many different like directors and things when stuff about imposter syndrome comes up, or dealing with like negativity or things like that, that it never truly goes away. Like, you know, I'm talking to someone who's made their first indie movie, and then the following week I'm talking to Danny Boyle, and they're saying the exact same thing about like, oh, it never, like, you know, he's like, I'm in my 70s and I still And he was like, yeah, and I still sometimes people will bring me comments or feedback or a critic review. And I'm like, ugh. And then I'm thinking about that, and I'm at an event or I'm wherever, and I'm constantly thinking about that negative thing or someone said. And then I'm wondering, should I have zigged when I should have zagged or whatever? And he was like, it never truly goes away. Is it just about, um, I suppose, for want of a better term, doing it anyway?
I think it's just finding ways to work with it almost because, yeah, I mean, look, the ideal therapeutically is if you become secure enough in yourself and you have enough self belief, then these things kind of bounce off you because you know at your core, I know I'm amazing. So, they can tell me I'm rubbish and I know I'm not. But the reality is, we all have our wounds, we all have our insecurities. We're not walking around so secure that things just bounce off us all the time. So yeah, things will hit us, but I think it's how you then work with it. I mean, you know what I mean? If you're Danny Boyle and you're going, well, maybe, there's a chance that things, if anyone's got a chance to be secure in themselves and what they're doing. And so many people do, you look at them from the outside and you go, how would they not be secure in what they're doing, right? They must know how good they are. But if there's any little kind of wound or little something that negativity can get into, any sort of self-doubt, but it's figuring out how to work with it. And it's like, okay, well, then if you can use it as a motivator and be like, well, I'm going to show you, okay, well, you know what? I'm actually going to push myself a little bit further in this direction, or I'm going to kind of learn from it in some way, not take them seriously, not give the voice power. People might not like me. Not everyone's going to like what I do. Completely get that. But I'm not going to use that as like, well, they're the voice of authority now. I am rubbish. So it's like, okay, that's their opinion. They didn't like it. But you know what? I like this. So I'm going to push forward with the things that I am doing. I'm going to listen to the people around me that do like it, because their voices are just as important. I don't want to diminish them by giving the one person that told me I was rubbish all the power, because actually all these people have been saying really nice things. They are just as powerful. So I'm going to kind of utilize that and hold on to that. But yeah, it's
yeah, it is funny though how we kind of just forget about the positive aspect. It's like, oh no, let's not pay attention to that. I'm just going to fixate on that one thing someone said to me. Do you have a subgenre or a type of horror film that you feel like you're more drawn to, or is it just, it could be anything and everything?
It's changed. I mean, look, I love monsters, so I love classic monsters. And I think because when I was like a little kid, I accidentally saw a clip of Nosferatu on the Under Pressure video, because I wasn't really allowed to watch horror movies. So I hadn't seen many monsters. I mean, I love like Goosebumps and Count Duckula and stuff, like the classic stuff. But so I saw him, and he just, oh my God, it terrified me. Like, it was so scary. It kept me awake night after night after. I mean, time feels weird when you're a kid, but it felt like it went on forever. That every night I thought I could see him coming up the stairs. And so from that, I really got into vampires, and I really got into classic monsters. And so I really like monsters. And I know historically, there's like, in good and bad sense, they've been used to represent otherness. So there can be some problematic elements that they've meant to represent something other to us, that in out psychology, well, they're not like us, so they're a monster. But at the same time, as someone who felt weird, I found so much comfort in monsters, and aesthetically, I just think they're cool. And my bathroom is all Creature from the Black Lagoon because it's just aesthetically stunning. So yeah, I'd say monsters, but obviously, as time's gone by, kind of being drawn into, I do appreciate the kind of psychological elements of it, but I'd probably still say a good monster is
you mentioned you were at Halloween Horror Nights last year. Did you get a chance to do Dark Universe in
Yes,
Epic?
I did. Yeah, I did. And honestly, going into the dark, more the monster bit, I had been waiting for that moment. I was literally just walking in and the Invisible Man was stood in one of the doorways, so I ran straight over when I met Invisible Man, and got on the Monsters Unchained ride, and I'd left it quite late in the day because I want to walk in when the sun's setting. I want to have that moment. I'd planned it all in my head, and got on Monsters Unchained. Absolutely incredible. I think I was probably annoying everyone because I'm just pointing out monsters they couldn't see them themselves, shouting the names. But it's a creature, Dracula. But went around it, and as I got to the front, there was a massive queue outside because it had just broken and shut down. It was shut down the rest of the day. So luckily I got on because I only had 1 day there with your 1 day pass. And if I hadn't got on Monsters Unchained, I would have cried. But I absolutely loved that land. Absolutely.
It's like, yeah, I feel like it's a horror fan's dream, like to be able to go into that.
Absolutely. Little nods to things like the Pretoria shop and stuff like that. It's like, oh,
I we done Monsters Unchained, I think, and then we done it a second time because I was like, I went back on my own because like everyone else was like, we've done it now, I don't need to do it again. And I'm like, no, I've got to do it. So we go back and do it a second time, and then I was like, let me do Curse of the Werewolf. And we get right up to the top of the queue, and then the clouds come in, and it gets closed for Storm.
No, did you get on it in the end or no? No,
because we only had that 1 day thing for Epic.
Yeah, it is very fun. It's short, but it's very fun. The werewolf.
Yeah, I think it was just for me. It was just like the theming and the whole idea of it. Sometimes the queue for me is like part of the ride.
Yeah, it was incredible, and all like the kind of caravans and it's very, very cool. But that land is me. I can't wait to see what they do with it. They've got to make it bigger because you walk in, it's just like walking into the old monster movie film sets, and it's like because I always loved that like Universal Studios when I was a kid. I loved they used to have the Beetlejuice graveyard review with all the monsters dancing, and I think I hadn't seen so many films, but because I maybe 7 was the first time I saw that. But I was just like spellbound by these monsters wearing sort of early glam rock kind of clothes and playing keyboard and guitars. Like absolutely obsessed.
That's why I think I've always been fascinated with Universal over Disney.
Yeah.
Because of the movies and stuff like that. Do you have any like bucket list things, whether it be horror or otherwise, that like you feel like you would like to tick off? Things you want to do, places you want to see, I don't know, something you want to experience?
I would, in terms of things I want to do, I definitely want to write a book. That's always been the plan. Like when I started Mental Health Monsters, originally it was to write a book about tying in mental health and monsters. And that was, I think, 2019. It's still not happened, that book. It kind of wandered off. It turned into a podcast for a bit, talking about mental health, and then it just died. And now it's reanimated in this new form. But definitely write a book. Places to go. I mean, honestly, it's really stereotypical, but I really want to go to Salem. Like, I really want to go to Salem. I really want to go to New Orleans. It is a lot of American stuff, to be honest. I know it's not, there's some issues over there at the moment, but that was always stuff I wanted to do. But I do want to go around and see more location around Europe. I want to go to Transylvania. It's somewhere I've tried to go a couple of times, never managed to get to it. But again, it's been an awakening in life. I've spent a lot of years putting stuff off because I wanted to save money, or I wasn't with the right person, or I was, kind of limited in what I could do for different reasons. And now it's like, do you know what? I just go off and visit some of these places. But there's a lot of things that I'd like to try and do. Smaller scale things, like in terms of career, and then, hopefully having the opportunity to then go off and travel and see more places.
And so what's the status of the book, and like where are we at with all that? Is that still, like, you've obviously said that was the first thing you mentioned, so I assume it's still a big thing.
It's still a thing. So I'm writing an article for another kind of collection of essays, which I don't know if I can say about now because it's only just kind of been starting to put together. So there's going to be some writing coming out there, which is a really cool start. But the book is still it's a plan. It's a plan. And the more that I'm doing this and the more that I'm kind of researching, so I've got the how horror speaks to the subconscious part, which is a very psychoanalytical talk. The new talk that starts in April is purely around sexuality and identity within horror. So that's a lot more about kind of queer theory and sexuality and identifying different types of sexuality through horror. So like Clive Barker features quite a lot in there, kind of limit experiences, cannibalism a lot in there. So there's sorry, Clive Barker isn't in the cannibalism bit, but just the just general themes kind of going through all that side of things. And then and writing another one around kind of the experience of coming of age as a teenage girl in horror movies. So through writing these different talks, it already is creating these different chapters, which I would tie in with my own kind of personal lived experience, I think, at the same time. of some of these things, and yeah, it's a plan. It'll hopefully get there one day. But at the moment, I've still got a full therapy practice and traveling around doing these talks, so time's a little bit tight. But you know,
Yeah,
we'll
I was
see.
going to say like it might be a good way to because obviously if people aren't lucky enough to be able to go and experience a talk or see some of this stuff, or like you said, you know, different talks, different topic, completely different show, completely different themes and things to talk about, that maybe at the end point, like if somebody could actually buy a physical book and then be able to explore those things anyway. um I suppose to kind of start to wind down then, where do you see uh I always use the term the state of horror, but and I don't mean that people pick that up in the wrong way. Like, you know, where it's at now, and you know how that landscape looks. Do you think we're going to lean more into like I don't know why it sticks out to me so much, but last year, I took somebody to like the Irish premiere of Bring Her Back, and I didn't really. So I really like Talk to Me. Um, I like a lot of what those guys are trying to do, and but I didn't. I wouldn't say I didn't expect much, but I didn't think it was going to like hit me or anything. And then we go to see it, and the person I go to see it with doesn't have kids or anything. And for some reason, like I was like stuck to the seat. I was like, this is like, and I came out of it feeling quite like miserable, but in like a really weird way where I couldn't stop thinking about like the movie and the whole concept. And very weird. It was like some sort of fever dream. For about a month afterwards, I used to fall asleep every night listening to the soundtrack
Oh wow.
for the movie because it was like the music is like really kind of spooky, but like I don't know, I felt like it was kind of like really therapeutic. And the other person I went to see it was just like, no, I don't really get it. Didn't really do anything for me. And it
Oh
was
wow.
weird to see like how we're obviously have different life experiences. So like I obviously something there, I was attached to something in that that they couldn't relate to.
I think horror is so subjective because it takes our human experiences and uses it with and against us. So it's very much personal. And you know what? You can all watch the same horror movie and take away a totally different meaning
Yeah.
from it. It'll very much, you know, we project our own stuff onto what we're seeing, or it'll hit a wound, or and so it's incredible in that way. I mean, I thought that film was harrowing. I thought that was really. I think from like working in grief work as well and seeing the impact that grief can have and where it can take you. And so I think that's really fascinating. I love like I talk about Midsummer quite a lot in the talks and people's different readings of the ending. Just the ending scene of Midsummer, people are really kind of all over the place of what they think that means or what they take from it. I saw the TV Glows and other films. Some people are like, nothing happens in that. Other people are like, it's the most harrowing, traumatic thing I've ever seen in my life. So I think like moving forward, it does seem to be tapping into. I mean, it's always tapped into human fears. What's interesting is, I guess, in the early days, it was like, here's a monster, and maybe it represents your sexuality. And now
Yeah.
it's very much like this is the horror of personal relationships, or the fear of just how bad this power dynamic could go, or you know, it's very much moved more into the realm, a bit more explicit about what it's talking about, but also in this really interesting, because we know more, right? We don't need to look at a vampire and go, maybe that's, you know, fear of reverse colonization, or maybe that's a fear of, you know, my own desire. It's like, it's a lot more explicit, but it's kind of fascinating that it seems to be more interpersonal. Like, looking at cannibalism, right? That used to be a thing of like real othering, of like, these are people from other countries and we can justify because maybe they like indulge in cannibalism. That's the worst taboo. So we can kind of see people as less than because of. And now cannibalism is being used to look at kind of interpersonal relationships and connection and sexuality and intimacy. So the tropes are like changing to reflect perhaps where our fears are sitting. So I think that's really, really interesting to see it as like a mirror of our kind of where our fears sit. And it does seem to be around aging, technology, and relationships are quite big, and power structures maybe.
Do you think I don't know why this popped into my head, but you know, like you get people that say, oh no, you know, I hate horror, I just, you know, I can't stand it, I whatever. And maybe it's not even about the gore or the blood or anything like that. Do you think there's some of that that's like a subconscious thing where people don't want to face those things without even realizing? I think there's so many people still in the world that like just have the blinders on, and it's like we spoke about, like, get a mortgage, meet a partner. And I know of people like, in their 50s and stuff like that, that would still probably tell me from like the area I'm in that, like, well, you get a husband or a wife or a partner or whatever, and oh yeah, sure, look, we argue all day every day, and like we basically despise each other, but that's just what you're supposed to do, and you just have to like get along with it. Do
Yeah.
you think some of like the reason people don't like some of this stuff is because it makes you, maybe like it turns a mirror, and like you kind of have to go,
I think so. Because the thing is, saying I don't like horror, it's such a huge genre. I mean, like, there's so many different elements to it. Okay, it's designed to create certain feelings, and I get it. But I think that's it. It's the avoidance of looking into those feelings. It's the avoidance of looking into the darkness, because it confronts, right? It confronts in different ways. It confronts us with the parts of ourselves. It confronts us with certain emotions and feelings, and it confronts the structures that we live within, right? It's by its nature rebellious and subversive, and it challenges social structures and social orders with this imagery that really rattles them and plays with it and makes us look at things a different way and question the world. And maybe some people don't want to do that, and even it just subconsciously, as you say. And it's not going to be for everyone. I'm certainly not someone that's going to be like, well, everyone should like it, and if you don't like it, then you're not looking at yourself properly. I've probably, I look at my life, I think I was probably harmed more by rom-coms in the early years, because it was like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I only spoke, yeah, I only spoke to a friend of mine on the weekend. We went out for a meal, and we were talking about that, the concept of like, you have all these preconceived notions of like how it's supposed to be, like the white picket fence with the thing, and this is what happens, and you bump into somebody in the post office and you fall in love, and if that doesn't happen, then obviously there's something wrong with me, and like I should be like, go away and hide in a cave somewhere, and there's something wrong. And when I think about that, I'm like, Jesus, I think I've picked up more things from movies like that than I probably have from a horror movie.
Well, that was the thing, because I was like a teenager at school who was like a little like odd looking, and didn't really feel like fit in, very, very shy. And I was watching all these rom-coms with like Freddie Prinze Jr. being like, well, why am I not the girl that they're kind of going after, and blah, blah, blah. Then I see like Ginger snaps and be like, all right, yeah, no, okay, I kind of get that more, right? That's more kind of how I feel inside. I can't do it, but I kind of feel it inside. So, but I think, not everybody wants to look at the dark and the uncomfortable. Not everyone wants to be frightened. As I say, I think it goes way beyond jump scares and blood and splatter, which I think most of us kind of see now. Although from the outside, I think people potentially, I mean, my mum and dad came to my talk. They don't watch horror movies. They've watched Lost Boys and stuff, and they like that kind of thing. But they came to my talk like, oh wow, there's more to it than just like jump scares. Like, yeah. So so it goes, but it's not that's frightening. What's frightening is what it shows us about ourselves, and I think that's potentially where people might find it difficult to look at, because it's a dark mirror in it.
Yeah, like even something, you mentioned growing up and like feeling like a bit of an outsider and being shy and things like that. And I think a lot of people feel the same, and then some of us harbor that stuff later in life. Like I definitely do still harbor some of those feelings. There's times when like about 10 years ago, I think it was, I took up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I wouldn't say full time, but like I took it more serious. I kind of trained on and off for years and didn't, and then I went back to it, and like now I teach kids and stuff. And it's funny. Like there's times where, like in my own training, not teaching kids or anything like that, where maybe I'll be faced with somebody who's maybe a bit better, a bit whatever, and like that bullied child starts to kind of come out. Like my ego starts to kind of go, I don't want to feel like this because I remember what this feels like, and I don't want to be like the outcast, or I don't want someone having like control over me physically. And I can sometimes it makes me kind of panicky because I can feel it coming out. I'm like, I'm not that person anymore, but that little boy is in there somewhere.
Yeah, like our wounded kids, our wounded teenagers, they stay with us, and it's it's important to connect with them, and to kind of explore what was going on for them, meet their needs. I won't go too deep into inner child work, but you can do all that kind of stuff in therapy. But they still carry those wounds, but they carry the creativity and the fun as well. So it's important that we kind of maintain that relationship with the younger self. They certainly stick around. I mean, in my head, I'm still the kid with I wore a head brace to a high school in Liverpool. I did not have a fun time. I had glasses, head brace, acne, the full set. So, definitely was something. And she's still there and she still responds in situations. But, it's the power of things that we can utilize that. And I think movies utilize that. Perhaps some of the nostalgia as well is that version of us connects into something around the nostalgia, and then it can be met both with positive feelings and some of the more difficult stuff too.
Yeah, I could see that. I have one or two more things I want to ask
Of course.
before I let you go. A lot of people would, I don't know, I suppose my question would be, do you think that the perception is changing around what I'm about to say? At one point, people would have probably looked at somebody like me or yourself and been like, oh, tattoos, into horror, into creepy stuff. It's not really for me. Like it's all gore and doom and gloom. And a lot of people kind of have that perception, I felt. And I don't know if you feel like that things are changing now. Maybe, as you said, we kind of know more, we have access to more information. But even something like last year I read this, and some people will still cringe when I say this, the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. Right now, I'm by no means am I into him, into any of the stuff he done, but I was just interested in. I seen something online somewhere. Someone was like, when you read it, it's not actually what you think it is. Yeah, and then I read it and I was like, huh. So whatever I had been told by other people who also probably didn't read it, and just what I assumed myself, and then what it actually was. Now you can take things from it and maybe go one way or the other with it, but I've at least tried to not have those perceptions about things that I don't really know anything about or understand. Do you think that's changing for people now who are in the horror community or horror adjacent things, or maybe even like I remember even like 15, 20 years ago, like a tattoo artist would be seen as kind of like it's tattoos, and you have like got tattoos and piercings and stuff. It was kind of like not a creepy thing, but people kind of like a CD, like they would kind of look down on it a little bit.
It's definitely changed in Liverpool. When I was a teenager, you used to have to run around the city centre because I had a lot of piercings, what tattoos I could afford. Wore a lot of black, got called Marilyn Manson on pretty much a daily basis, even though I looked absolutely nothing like him. And you would just run for your life. It was so violent. Whereas now, it might be because I'm older, it doesn't seem to really, you'll get the odd person that's like, oh, I like your tattoos or whatever, comments, but you don't generally get the same response. I think it's changing. I think it's actually quite interesting going from that weird goth kid where you got bullied for it to it feeling like it's all quite popular now. I know that sounds odd, but it's almost like shit.
It's like a cool thing now.
Yeah, that kid's like, wait, what? Corner cool now? Wait, what? What's happening? Kind of, or the films that you watch, suddenly it's taken in a different light. I've never really wanted to judge things. I think that's really helped me in my career because I've just had a curiosity around everything, because some of the worlds I've worked in, I worked a lot with crystal meth use. I've worked a lot with different types of kind of kink and stuff. And I think just having an open mind and a curiosity about everyone has been really, really helpful. But I think perhaps that comes from being into more kind of alternative culture as well, because there's this sort of, well, I know what it's like to feel judged or seen as creepy or weird. Or seen as problematic in Liverpool as well. Child's play was a big part around the Jamie Bulger killing. So there was horror was seen as something very, very dangerous. So to be seen as someone who liked horror, that also threw up questions. So, it has always been put in this odd kind of bucket with trash culture, but also something a little bit dangerous, like satanic panic kind of thing. But I do feel like it's opening up. I think people have more curiosity around it. It's interesting to see the responses to Satanism, because I was one of those teenagers that got the Anton LaVey Satanic Bible. I was like, yeah, I'm going to read this. I'm so cool. And it's actually quite human. It's quite empowering. So Yeah, I think things are open up. I think people are seeing things a bit more. I also don't know whether it's just though because my social media is just full of people like me now that I'm like, everybody loves this stuff now, but it does seem to be.
Yeah, like
It does seem to
curates
go
like
up.
what you already are, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, but when I do the talks, it's rooms full of people from all different backgrounds, all different types of people, all just kind of interested. So I think it's pretty cool. I think it's opening up, and it'll be interesting to see what happens to like the kind of film genre as it goes through, because one, it's becoming a little more, it's getting recognized as a proper genre of film now and proper films, but also the world has become so horrific. It's like, okay, well, where's this gonna lead? Horrific at a rate I don't think we can quite comprehend. So
Before I ask the final question, so it
yes.
just popped into my head with what you said, about things that you thought were one way and now it seems like they're the other, and they're popular and they're this and they're that. How would I frame this? Do you think that's a lot of what's wrong with people, in the sense of that repression? Like, you mentioned things like kinks and stuff, and I know a lot of people get uncomfortable when you mention something like that. Um, but a lot of people have them, and I think, is that part of the problem, knowing you have it, or knowing that you have some sort of desire, or even if it's something like, people who were into extremely gory, like kind of underground movies, like something like August Underground, or some of those like kind of crazier movies that you want to kind of be out there and say, these are the things I like, I just like them, and that's what I'm into. But there's a kind of but if I tell people that, they might look at me differently, or if I say, similar to, I suppose, when people would come out and say, I might be bisexual, or I might be whatever. It's the fear of like the other person's reaction to like,
Yeah,
oh, that's horrible.
it's around othering. It's all kind of fits into that kind of othering thing, and yeah, I think with sex, it's really interesting because there's a lot around kind of taboo, but taboo is created through societal structures, right? So it's what we're told. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some things that are dangerous and harmful, they're different. So we're not talking about like
Mhm.
harmful. But in kind of where it's been placed in taboo, just because it was like, oh, well, people want
Yeah.
to do that now. And that was often coming from structures, because before structures like, certain religions or certain cultures got involved, people were just kind of doing what they wanted and like having a nice time. They didn't even label it as like homosexuality or heterosexuality, right? Everyone was just doing what they kind of felt good, what they liked. And then structures came along and said, well, this one's okay, and this one's not okay, and this one's normal, and this one's not normal. And it created this kind of sense of what it was okay to be into and what it said about you. And I think then things to do with kink or liking something a little bit different or feeling a little bit different, suddenly became something wrong, and then that created shame and repression created so many issues, and is so difficult for people because it sits with your identity then, and it goes from, well, I'm told this thing is wrong, so I am somehow wrong. But
Yeah.
again, people like Clive Barker allowed for some form of like repression relief by putting stuff out there, even not even just by his films but by himself, and kind of looking at those kind of experiences around kind of extreme distress and extreme ecstasy at the same time, and kind of exploring different elements that you don't always get to see, or if it is, it's put in the box of like, oh, that's the weirdo behind closed doors doing strange things, rather than like, look, it's here, it's out here.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason I brought it up was because when I mentioned the Satanic Bible, as I was reading it, I was like, huh, this is really like kind of enlightening in a way, because I know you could take it to an extreme. And I feel like you can really do that with anything. Like, certain people can take things to an extreme and it can become harmful or become dangerous or whatever. But like, for the most part, there was a lot of things I was reading in that where it was kind of like what you just said, where it was like people just done what felt. So if it was like a man with a man, a woman with a man, whatever it might have been, yeah, and he kind of was leaning into like, just do what like feels right in a way. And even like, I remember buying it and I was like, can I even tell people? And this was only last year. I'm like, should I even be mentioning that like I'm reading this? Will people look at me and be like, or like, when I go to the the jiu-jitsu club, like if someone found out I was reading a Satanic Bible, will they like not allow me to teach kids anymore? Like, will I still be vetted and like, will everything be fine? Or will they look at me like, he's a weirdo, you don't want him around your kids?
Which is so much the fear of othering, isn't it? It's so much the fear of, will I be perceived as something like, what is it, mad, bad, or dangerous to know? Would I be put in that category of problematic, right? And then so that's the experience. But I think that's where we find a lot of relief through art and films and books and music that offers us something different and kind of goes, look, it's here. And okay, sometimes you look at it and you're kind of going, like, I remember seeing Cronenberg's Crash when I was like, I think an older kid in the clothes. I went to like a skate shop, and I think one of the older people in there like was like, oh, you should watch this, and watch and just be like, what am I watching? Like, I'm watching it again now. I think it's fascinating, but just being like, oh, what? There's like this different stuff that's being put on the screen. At least it's being brought into the realm of kind of seeing it and experiencing it, even if it's when you first see it. It brings a strange feeling because it's like, well, okay, I don't know if I'm supposed to be watching this. Like, I don't know if I'm really supposed to be taking this in. Yeah. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Okay, so where can people follow you and kind of keep up to date with what's going on, and when you have more things to announce, shows, hopefully a book at some point, all that kind of stuff? Where's the best place that people can keep up to date with you?
Best place is Instagram, because I'm old and every time I try and do TikTok, I can't bring myself to do it. So I think I've got about 5 videos on there that I'm just battling with. But Instagram is the main place. So it's mental health _ monsters is me. And I'll be putting up there around kind of upcoming seed talks. I've got some different talks coming up around different places around the country, and a few coming up in London, which is slightly different, some workshops they're going to be online. I'm doing a workshop which for American audiences at the end of the month, so that's going to be done at a time when American audiences can kind of watch the horror and subconscious one, which means I've got to do it at 10 o'clock at night, so hopefully it'll be it'll still be interesting. But yeah, so that'll all be on there on Instagram.
So for everybody listening or watching this, all the links will be down below anyway. Final question, and before I let you go, is why horror, and what does it mean to you?
Horror was a place where I didn't feel like the weirdo anymore. Horror was the place where I felt like I could actually see more of what my internal landscape felt like, because it didn't always feel fun and cheerful and poppy. Sometimes it did, but sometimes it felt quite dark and scary. And actually horror was a place where I don't feel alone. And so for me, it was that. And through that, then meeting people who felt the same in the communities. And I honestly, for all the stuff where people have seen us as weird or creepy or problematic or psychopaths because you like Art the Clown or whatever it is, I actually think we are people who have some of the best empathy and understanding and connection. So for me, horror is about feeling understood and the people.
It's been a pleasure. I could probably talk to you for another hour, I'll be honest. I'm trying to like reel back. I have a habit of doing that, but hopefully we can do this again maybe later in the year or something. Maybe there'll be more stuff that you can talk about, more projects and things like that. One final thing before I let you go. If you had to, this is probably going to put you on a spot now. If you had to recommend a movie, a horror movie that you think everybody should see, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Doesn't matter what it is.
So it's hard because the first one that popped into my head is more of a psychological one, because I think it's really interesting psychologically. Mm-hmm. I'd say The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers is a fantastic psychological one. I was going to go and see Possum because I talk about that so much, but I also don't know if I recommend Possum or not. So one
of the two. People can flip a coin. So yeah, you're going to see Possum or you can see The Lighthouse.
I'll say Lighthouse just in case people watch Possum and then complain because it's
like I said, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate the time and I hope we get to do this again.
Thank you so much. I've loved it, definitely.